I never know how to start these things when I'm dealing with a new haircut. Hey guys, it's Sarah from Just My Typewriter, and you might notice that my Olympia CE-12 is back again. So if you've seen some of my previous episodes or videos on this channel, I have a problem with collecting broken Olympia typewriters. I don't know how this started, it just kind of kept happening. And I ran into this Olympia CE-12 in my local Goodwill for about $10 almost a year ago. I brought it home, turned it on, and it wasn't working. I went through the process of repairing it. I had to replace the drive belt, which is a pretty easy fix on electrics, and if you're interested in that video, I do have one about fixing drive belts on electrics. I'll link that in the description below. Another thing I had to fix on it was the return pulley levers. They just weren't working. I couldn't get the lines to advance, and through the help of the typewriter maintenance group, I was able to figure that out. So I felt pretty good about fixing this Olympia typewriter and went to list it for sale on Facebook Marketplace. Now, I always sell the most around Christmas time on Facebook Marketplace. I usually sell out of all of my typewriters. When I listed this one for sale, I did sell it to someone who was giving it to their young kid on Christmas morning. And the next day, the day after Christmas, I got a Facebook message in panic that said it's not working. And my heart dropped. I hate selling things that don't work or aren't perfect. So I did an exchange with them and traded them for another electric typewriter from my collection that was working, and they were really happy with the results of that. But it meant that I had brought home another broken Olympia, which I already thought I had fixed. When they sent me the video of what had happened with their Olympia, they turned on the motor and I couldn't even hear a hum in the video. So I was thinking that maybe the drive belt had slipped. The drive belt is in there to run the gears or the pulleys in this machine to operate the motor and get everything working. They melt over time, and if they're the wrong size, they can often lead to problems in your typewriter. So I thought that maybe it had just snapped or slipped off of the pulleys. I opened it and that's not what happened. I don't really know what happened because I took the casing off and it ran fine. For like 20 minutes ran fine. I chalked it up to luck, put it back together, and stuck it on its back into my office with the rest of my collection, thinking that I had solved the problem. I had then listed it on Facebook Marketplace, got a random message one day of someone wanting to buy the Olympia, felt great about that, and went to do a type test. If there's anything I've learned from that experience of selling machines that weren't perfect and needed help after the fact, it's that I really need to type test before I take them to the sale. I went through to do my type test on the Olympia, and the shift basket dropped and never came back up. The shift basket problem was one that I didn't really know how to fix because I didn't know what was causing it. I thought everything was working on this machine, and so it led me down a path of really long testing and tinkering. Now, the shift basket in this machine operates in the way that it drops down to type in caps and pops back up to type in lowercase. It has two springs on the sides and buttons on the front for shift lock and shift. There are a couple places where things can go wrong in this machine, and one thing I've learned from doing typewriter repair is that you kind of need to go through all the linkages and sections associated with what's not working. So I started going through all the bars and the buttons associated with the shift basket. I tried to pull it back up into place, to mess with the springs to see if that would trigger it. Nothing I seemed to do with this machine would trigger it to come back up. Again, I don't really know what was happening. But as I started to play around with the shift basket, I started to realize there might be things that I could fix. And in the meantime, while I was doing all of this testing, I did have to get that person who was interested in it a typewriter. So I took one out of my collection that I had planned to keep forever, my Olympia Report Deluxe. And I'm really sad about this. I purchased my Olympia Report Deluxe for $5 at my local Restore, untested, brought it home, plugged it in, and it worked immediately and beautifully. This is a very classic Olympia electric typewriter, and one of the reasons it was on my bucket list of machines was because it's the typewriter mentioned in the Nora Ephron film You've Got Mail, which is one of my favorites. In fact, the person who had this typewriter loved it so much they bought a second one. Not that I would ever do that, or have already. And I can see why it was such a beloved machine in that movie and beloved by collectors. In fact, here's a type test to show why. The sound on this is so active and striking The comment from the Nora Ephron film, You've Got Mail, is that it's like a shot, it's reporting, and it really feels like that. It feels very strong, it's got a really loud sound to it, and it just is so steady. It was a really great machine, and the person who bought it from me was very happy to have it, and it's in a better place now. I can get over it. But it meant, though, that I had a broken Olympia I had to fix and had lost a good one, which I wasn't thrilled about. In my testing, I started to think about things that might impact that shift basket. One of those is my shift alignment. So when you have lowercase and uppercase letters, you want them to be typing on the same line. So you want your uppercase H's to be the same bottom level as your lowercase h's. Otherwise, you get this wonky text that's up and down. And if you've had that on a typewriter before, it probably means that you need to adjust your shift alignment. And there are lots of really helpful videos to do that on the internet. I highly recommend Phoenix Typewriter for those videos. They are in different places on every machine. On my Remette that I just did, they were on the side, and I had trouble locating them. On this machine, they're actually on the top of the shift basket. But I didn't know that when I fixed it the last time, because the last time I had to fix the adjustment on this, I went from the bottom and turned a screw only on the left side to adjust that shift alignment. At the time it seemed to work, so I didn't question it. So it was typing this way, and that's why it was dropping down and getting stuck, because the shift alignment was wrong. So I had to figure out how to go back in and fix that. I learned that this was a problem just by watching the shift basket and then rewatching my old video and remembering that I did that. So I undid the adjustments I had done previously on the bottom of the shift basket, where there's only a screw on one side, turned the machine back over, and started to do equal turns on both the left and right side of the shift basket. In doing this, I also started to notice that there were these little plastic spacers on the bottom of the alignments that had melted away and left sticky residue on the plate below them. So we fixed the shift alignment. Thought that would work. I set the machine aside, let it sit for a couple days, and then went back to test it later. And that wasn't enough, I guess. It did seem to come back up quicker than it had previously. I wasn't getting that dropping problem where I couldn't pop it back up, but it still wasn't perfect. I then started to think about the fact that that enter button was stuck when I first got it. It had some sort of grease or oil in there that just was causing it not to advance, and made me think more about the shift keys. Maybe they are getting stuck too. So I went in and degreased those as well. It's not something I normally would have thought of while I was cleaning the machine initially, but it made sense with some of the other issues on the machine. And while it didn't immediately fix the problem, it definitely made it work a lot better. So I just continued to test, because as I thought about it, the way that I store a machine in my collection may not be the way that the end user will store it in their home. I set them up on their backs. People might take them home, put them upside down in their cars and under their Christmas trees. A lot of those things can trigger more issues in the machine. So I started to leave the machine over periods of time at different angles to see if any one of those specifically caused the problem to happen. It seems to happen when it's on its back, not so much when it's laying down. Upside down didn't seem to have much of a difference. I left it for weeks at a time to see if that would help or cause it to happen more frequently, and it just seemed to have the same shift issue every single time. What's happening now is that when I turn the machine on after a couple days of not using it, I'll press the shift button and the basket will drop and not pop up immediately. However, if I hit the shift lock followed by shift again, it seems to trigger it out of that shift position, comes right back up, and you never have that problem again while it's on. In fact, you don't have that problem for the rest of the day, even if you turn the machine on or off again. If you let it sit for a couple days, regardless of angles, it'll still do that the first time. Like it's kind of warming up some sort of shift mechanism inside the machine after not being used. And it still is happening today. I don't have it perfect yet, but at least it's a lot easier to manage because I know how to fix it every time. It's kind of like when I had a 27-year-old Oldsmobile, and every once in a while on a hill it just would stall out. You have to turn the car off and turn it back on, and then you're good to go. Really terrifying though when you're at a stop sign on a hill. I will say the Olympia CE-12 is still a really good electric typewriter, but it doesn't have that same active, strong sound when typing. So here's a type test of the Olympia CE-12. I learned anything from this process, it's that I don't always think about how long some of my fixes might last. When I do that initial type test, fix those problems, and it works for the video, I often set it aside and don't think that I ever need to go back in and tinker again to see if there's more problems. It worked, it should work forever, and that's not always the case, especially with these electrics. There's a lot of things that can go wrong and then might trigger in different ways over time. So it's important to go back after you've used something and put it away to see if it's still working after your fixes. I might never have thought to go back in and check this machine's shift alignment, which was something I messed up on my own, just not thinking very clearly. And I wouldn't have noticed that if I hadn't gone back to do this type test. So always type test before you sell. Glad I know that now. And if you have something that you think you've fixed, it's important to go back in and test it after a period of time. The process of fixing this machine and testing it and continuing to test it took a really long period of time. However, having a problem that happens the same way every time is a lot easier than something that's intermittent. Also a lesson I learned from the 27-year-old Oldsmobile. So the fact that I still have this shift basket drop, but it always happens in the same way every time and I can trick it out of it every time, that's a good thing, because at least I can give some instructions on how to do that if I decide to rehome this machine. If you've had this issue on your Olympia and have fixed it, please leave me a comment below on how to fix it, because I'm grasping at straws and running out of patience. I learned a lot working on this typewriter, twice, and every time I work on a new machine, I do learn something new. So if you're interested in learning more about typewriters, there are some other videos on this YouTube channel, as well as all the videos I mentioned in this one linked in the description below. I also have an Instagram at just.my.typewriter. And thank you all so much for watching, and remind you, you're just my typewriter. And man, I'm learning a lot about bangs right now. Gosh, they always get in my eye.